All right, everyone, we're back once again to Carl von Clausewitz on war. This will be the first proper recording where we actually dive into the book itself, namely the first book. This book is titled aptly, What is War? And what I really liked about this book is that it's divided clearly into smaller sub-segments. And before started this recording, I read the three first sub-segments, namely the introduction, the definition of what is war, and then the third subsection, which is called utmost use of force. Now, from the get-go, it's quite clear to me that this is very clearly about war and combat, because that's what the whole discussion is circling about. And von Clausewitz doesn't really cut any corners in how he lays out the cards on the table in a really brutal fashion. In the definition part, what I think is noteworthy from business angle is that how he leaves out that that warfare is really a small, or what would be the right word, like a collection of individual duels, all the way down to two entities, like two armies or two soldiers, and then you just scale it up to a whole theater of war. And now if you're more of a aggressive inclination, likewise, if there are like two business actors out on the market who compete for the same thing head to head, then if you're of a more aggressive nature, you could liken that into a duel. Naturally, it doesn't really carry over in a clean fashion, because after all, this is warfare. But one good takeaway from this is that all larger trends or events always consists of individual actions and individual actors, people that are in interaction with one another. The goals why these people are in interaction with one another may of course differ in war. According to Clausewitz, the aim is to enforce your will upon the other, while in a business context it could be more indirect. I could see myself that the competition between two businesses within the same industry could be about persuading or proving to the potential client that they should go with this business instead of the other, and how they manage to overtake each other, and that's sort of up in there. It happens way more indirect on a more abstract level. Like businesses are not fighting there, instead of like putting stuff out there on the market and then people get in touch with those messages, calls, discussions, and then the outcome is dependent on that. One thing that immediately comes to mind could be like insurance, for example. Like you have one person who is looking for insurance, and then the insurance companies naturally want to sell them that insurance, but which insurance company is picked ultimately? Well, it's up in there. It really depends on what each of these insurance companies deploys and what they do. Then the utmost use of force was interesting to read, because there was a lot of stuff in there in that chapter which would be very offensive to modern sensibility, to say the least, and I'm not going to reiterate them here, because chances are I could get in trouble for that, more or less, to put it frankly. Von Clausewitz doesn't cut corners. He more or less lays out how he sees that things work and how they are. Instead, and he doesn't really spend any time arguing like the moral angle, because he sort of forgoes it as like irrelevant, and he focuses more on practical matters. I picked out that he had like this dichotomy between like emotional reasons and like rational reasons. He spoke about like the hostile view and a hostile feeling, and they were juggling with one another. And at least in warfare, both fuel conflict, but he focused more on the hostile view, because that's like what people usually think about first. And it could be driven by both emotional and rational reasons. And in a sufficiently advanced society like rationality is usually on the forefront, but Clausewitz points out likewise that there is also always emotion involved, no matter what the rationality is, and the emotion sort of fuels the rational decision making. And this is something that I've also seen in marketing, both how people act and what the sort of marketing gurus talk about. Like, we can rationalize the reasons we do day in and day out, but there is more often than not always emotion involved, and without emotion just doesn't really have the energy. And to me it seems like a more of a universal human thing, that even though we have rational decisions and rational reasons, or we've convinced ourselves that there are rational reasons, there's always like a emotional spark that either sets it moving and it keeps moving. So that's really something that could be taken out here, to basically take both aspects into account: the emotional reasons why we do something and the rational reasons why we do something, and then just figuring out what comes first in what situation. And then he also mentions impulsivity. When you deploy a high level of rationality, you could basically control and direct your like emotional energy towards more specific goals, instead of being like super impulsive and just going all over the place. And that sort of relates quite closely to also what I see in business, namely how important it is to focus. If you can focus on a few things well, instead of focusing on many things, then you're able to achieve more, and you'll also be able to achieve the things you actually desire. But if you're sort of dabbling in many things and going all over the place, then you will get something out of it, but it's not necessarily any output of significance. So that's why focus and like having a clear idea what you're trying to achieve is so powerful. Seems to apply in warfare, and it at least still applies in the modern context in what we focus on in business. So that's for today's video about von Clausewitz, and tomorrow I will be continuing with another recording where we proceed further in the book. Thank you for joining in. I hope you got something out of it. Feel free to drop comments and tell me what you think, and if this brought any ideas to you. Do that, and I'll be speaking to you soon once again. Take care.